Well, I'm joined now from Tel Aviv by former diplomat Alon Pinkas, who's been chief of staff and a foreign policy advisor to one Israeli prime minister and four foreign prime ministers. Thanks for joining us. Now, Benny Gantz is Benjamin Netanyahu's main rival, isn't he? Will he be able to bring down Netanyahu's government?
That's doubtful. I mean, if we're transitioning from Bristol Center to Israel Center / Gaza Center, it's actually much clearer here than it is in Bristol Center. If I take your previous story, let's do the arithmetic first. Mr. Netanyahu's government has a majority of 64 members of parliament out of 120. Mr. Gantz represents 8, which means the Netanyahu coalition at this point is 72. So if Mr. Gantz, pursuant to his law to dissolve parliament, withdraws from the government, then 72 minus 8, we're back to 64. That leads us to something, excuse me for being a little complicated or complex, explaining a complex concept. This leads to 2 different scenarios. One is trying to get 5 members of the coalition to defect and bring down the government and precipitate an early election. But there is another course. It's called a constructive motion of no confidence. If 61 members of parliament, a majority of 1, present not only a motion of no confidence, but an agreed upon consensual candidate to be the prime minister, then an election is avoided. So the question is, can 5 defectors from the coalition be found and crown either Mr. Gantz or someone else? I doubt that.
It's interesting. You doubt it, but it's interesting that Benny Gantz then has made this move at this time, isn't it? Because for the first time in a year, Benjamin Netanyahu has polled higher than his main rival. And the trend has been downwards, hasn't it, for Gantz and upwards for Netanyahu. So why are Israelis rallying around Benjamin Netanyahu at this time?
They're not. It's one poll in which there was one question about suitability to become prime minister, in which Netanyahu overtook Mr. Gantz, who is seen as somewhat weak and feeble and lacks a clear and coherent message. But in other polls, or in different questions in that poll that you quoted from, over 70% think that Mr. Netanyahu should resign. 59% think that an election should be held. Over 60% see him responsible and accountable for the October 7th debacle, the ensuing mismanagement of the war. Now,
he survives, though, doesn't he, Mr. Pinkas? He keeps surviving, Benjamin Netanyahu. And even though 2 members of this 3-man war cabinet are openly dissenting to his war strategy, that's a pretty big rift.
It is, but their dissent is confined to the rhetorical rather than the practical. They haven't done anything. They have been threatening to leave the government for the better part of the last 4 months. They joined, indeed, 4 days after October 7th. On October 11th, they formed a war cabinet. And they have been threatening to leave ever since. But every time they found some excuse, we're responsible, we're the adult in the room. If it wasn't for us, the extreme right wing will get its way. We prevented and preempted very callous and reckless decisions to be made.
A lot of the disagreement you describe is about what happens after the war, the plan for the day after. So how long can Benjamin Netanyahu go on avoiding that question, do you think?
Not for long, because this is one, I mean, aside from the fact that he should have resigned on October 7th, and every day in the 237 days since, 236 days since, his biggest mistake, his biggest faux pas was not only not to come up with a post-war Gaza plan, but to deride and reject any American plan that was put on the table, part of which was endorsed by the British government.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Alon Pinkas, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for speaking with us.
My pleasure, sir.